inquiring, thoughtful. The German philosopher Martin Heidegger called it the ultimate question of metaphysics. Why is there something rather than nothing? For centuries, we have tried to solve this puzzle using statements of fact or propositional answers. We point to the Big Bang, or a necessary creator, or the mathematical laws of the universe. But any answer formatted as things exist because of X hits a logical wall. A necessary being is something. A mathematical structure is something. The moment you use X as the explanation for why things exist, you have to assume X already exists, and the question simply reappears at the level of X. Logicians call this property Koan structure. It happens when offering a sufficient answer to a question structurally traps you into re-asking the exact same question. We lack a satisfying answer not because our telescopes aren't powerful enough, or because we haven't run enough particle collisions.
The problem is internal to the logic of cause and effect itself. Whenever we search for a factual, causal ground for the entire universe, we force our minds into an infinite regression. Any cause we name demands its own prior cause, preventing us from reaching a true origin. This structure also prevents us from starting at pure absence. If you try to propose an absolute zero as the starting point of reality, you have to define it to distinguish it from everything else. By picking it out and giving it specific boundaries, it becomes a determinate concept. The lowest coherent floor of reality we can talk about is minimal difference. That is the absolute lowest threshold of non-identity required to have any contrast, any shape, or any definition at all. This shifts the Leibnizian puzzle. The well-formed question isn't why there is something instead of pure nothing. The question is, why is there minimal difference instead of an absolute blank identity? Since our standard causal logic cannot penetrate below this threshold of minimal difference, we must abandon searching for a factual cause and look for a different kind of origin. If the beginning of reality cannot be stated as a fact, we have to consider a different mechanism. What if the origin is an action? In the mid-20th century, philosophers of language like J.L. Austin established two ways we use words. The first is constative speech. This is language that simply describes the world as it already is, statements that are either true or false. The second is performative speech. These are words that enact things rather than describe them. When a person says, "I promise," or a judge says, "I pronounce you married," they aren't reporting on a fact. The act of speaking creates a new reality in real time. Ordinary performative statements have a hard limit. They only function if they are embedded in a pre-existing framework of rules. A promise requires a shared social contract. A marriage requires a legal system to recognize it. Prior to the threshold of minimal difference, there were no legal systems, no laws of physics, and no causal structures to rely on. An ordinary performative act cannot create a universe from scratch. This requires extending the concept to its limit, the absolute performative. This is an enactment that doesn't operate within an existing set of conditions, but actually generates the framework of conditions itself. The paradigm instance is found in Islamic theology, centering on the divine command kun, translated as be. Scholars analyzed kun not as a physical mechanism, but a punctual enactment. The command addresses a subject whose existence is constituted by the act of being spoken to. Because it does not rely on a prior framework of natural laws to function, it bypasses the recursion of cause and effect. It doesn't find a world, it founds one. The absolute performative breaks the Koan structure. It clears the threshold of minimal difference, acting not as a statement of fact within the universe, but as the generative action that makes facts possible in the first place. We can test this structural mechanism by laying it over other historical traditions. Take the Genesis command, "Let there be light." On inspection, this fiat operates within a pre-existing void or formless matter. Because it acts upon something that is already there, it remains an ordinary performative. It is a creative change within a framework rather than the origin of the framework itself. We see another variation in the Vedic concept of Vak, or primordial speech. However, Vak is typically construed as a co-eternal, expressive self-articulation of the absolute. It lacks the sharp, imperative quality of an absolute performative addressed to the non-existent, serving more as a constituent aspect of reality than its punctual command. By comparing these failures to meet the absolute limit, we see why the Koan imperative stands as the unique logical blueprint for this mechanism. It is the only instance that satisfies all the criteria. It is an imperative, it is addressed to the not yet existent, and it generates its own conditions for success. This brings us to a specific, definable position, the unknown answer. This is not an admission of human ignorance. We aren't throwing our hands up in defeat, and we are not appealing to mysticism or an unknowable divine magic. It is a precise logical boundary. We have simply reached the point where the origin of the universe sits outside the category of propositional explanation. We habitually demand that "why is there something?" be answered with a physical cause. We assume the universe began with a fact.
But facts require a framework. Instead, the universe began with an enactment. We have to stop searching for a missing variable in the equation of existence. The answer isn't a hidden piece of data. It is the original constitutive act that made equations and our minds possible at all.